Lynes on Design. We are here today with our good friend Jim Van Dyke from the Greenery. And I have to tell you, it is a beautiful day on Hilton Head, and we are going to be talking today about maintenance. And it's something, to be honest with you, Jim, when we first started talking, and you know, I was more interested in the blooms and the plants and the flowers, but I've come to really appreciate the importance of maintenance and how it can really enhance my property, make my life a whole lot easier, keep me cost effective so I don't have to keep buying things. There's just so much to know.
Absolutely, and there's a lot of technical aspects that go into yard maintenance or landscape maintenance and upkeep. Of course, there's a lot of the grass mowing and pruning. We got to have nice crisp edges. We want to go ahead and blow off clean surfaces like we have here. But a couple of things that we wanted to go ahead and talk about today are things like the shovel edging.
Okay.
When we put pine straw down or mulch down, there's a lot more that goes into it than just throwing a bunch of stuff out and making some new color.
We've actually had a lot of fun. We've been out here for a few minutes kind of getting ready, and you have to tell everyone the technique because it's amazing what your guys do and what you really do.
Well, whenever we come in, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to come in and we're going to remove some of the old debris and accumulation that's there. Okay. And we're actually going to create a deep V edge, which is basically the concept of coming in the back side and the front side and creating a V in the dirt.
Why?
Well, if you don't do that, that grass or the pine straw or the mulch is going to fall over the grass, or when it rains, it's going to wash it out. Okay. So we want to go ahead and get that nice and tucked in there so it stays put.
And today we're going to go to two different locations. The first half of our show, we're here in Sea Pines, actually, at this fabulous house, and you describe it as a very natural setting.
Well, it's a little bit of both. There's a lot of natural plantings here and, and a natural way of keeping the landscape going, and then there's also somewhat of a more refined look to it as well. So there's both. From the street, when you look in, it's very natural. Plants are kind of on their own. We still do some pruning on it.
Right.
There's
a method to your madness.
There is. We do go ahead and do some key removal of material to kind of let the sunlight get through, so we still have nice lush material all the way to the ground.
Well, let me ask you a question about that. When you are putting together a maintenance plan for me, can you take me through some of these steps? In other words, would you look at my grounds, make an assessment? How does all that work? What does that really look like?
Well, the first time we come out to a yard, we're going to go ahead and assess the entire thing. We're going to look at shade patterns. What do the trees look like? Do we have dead material in the trees, cankers in the trees, things that need to be taken care of? We also look at the plant material. Are there insect problems, fungal problems? Are they having their root problems? Maybe there's too much water sitting there and causing some issues. Are there dead pieces that need to be pruned out? Oh, wow. Do we need to go in and do rejuvenative pruning of plant material to give it new life? How's the turf condition? Does the turf have insect problems or fungal problems? Do we have sun-shade issues? So like I said, there's a lot of technical aspects that go into the actual materials that are on the yard.
When you're doing this, am I walking through with you, or do you basically have your team who's out there kind of doing the initial assessment?
I would love to have you out there.
I would rather have you go and do it.
Well, we can do that as well.
Okay.
If the client's not available or doesn't really want to be part of that and they just want to find out what it's going to take, we're more than happy to do that. We've got a lot of technical abilities. We've got a lot of horticultural knowledge in the company. They can go out and assess everything. We'll give you a full review of it. Okay. Give you a call, try and meet with you, and go over it. Okay. But if you want to walk around with the yard and ask lots of questions, we're happy to answer it.
Well, and I'm sure that a lot of people do want to do that. Okay, so we've talked about pruning, we've talked about mowing, we've talked about pine strawing as maintenance. What are some of the other things that you all do?
Well, we also have a spray department, our chemical department that takes care of. Well, actually, I do have something for you. One of the things that we're going to demonstrate in a little bit is where we're spraying some horticultural oil. And we have soft-bodied and hard-bodied scale that affect a lot of the plant material here in the South.
I've heard about that, but don't know what it is.
Well, they're little tiny insects, and just so happens I've got a hard-bodied scale here, and you can just barely see it.
Oh,
yeah.
And that's his little mouth, right?
That's the inside of him. That's the actual part, the animal part. But they have hard-bodied scales have actual piercing mouth parts, and then soft-bodied have sucking mouth parts. Okay. Both of them take all the chlorophyll out of the plant material, all the nutrients out, and they leave the plant very chlorotic, and in mass numbers can actually devastate the plant. So we come in and we actually spray a horticultural oil to suffocate the plant or the scale
Oh,
and save the plant. So
amazing. So not only are you treating externally, but you're treating systemically too.
we can do that, and we have done that, and we will do that. But we'll
Okay.
need to talk with the client and recommend those when it's needed.
Now, is maintenance something that you prefer a routine for? Do you like us to get on a schedule, if you will?
Absolutely. You know, we want to come in weekly so
Okay.
that one, we can continue to assess the yard.
And plant material meaning trees, meaning bushes, everything?
Most everything. I mean, it's not every plant out there, but your magnolias, your Elaeagnus, you know, some of your viburnums are very much affected by it. So
You know, and just talking in kind of broad spectrum and generic terms, this kind of a landscape that you said is very naturalistic and very indigenous of what's going on down here, what are some of the specific things you would recommend doing if I had that kind of a yard?
all right, well, looking at a yard like this, of course, we want to have nice crisp edges that we
Okay.
talked about. From the road, we want to still have a very nice, neat appearance.
Okay.
But in this particular case, we want to have somewhat of a natural landscape. So the plant material is let go, so to speak,
Okay.
here in the front. But then when we get closer to the foundation of the house and around the house,
It's
they
more
actually,
coiffed.
yes,
I
like
love
word.
that. Yeah, well, and I mean, I can just, well, it looks very planned. Is that a fair word to say?
That is. It's almost manicured, but I wouldn't go quite that far.
Exactly. Oh, it's comfortable, like elegant, sophisticated, but very comfortable. It's very inviting to go in. Around the pool area, beautiful area too.
Absolutely. And in the summertime, we'll have some color that's all around there. So it's a place that's very inviting. People want to just walk in and spend some time.
Is part of the maintenance helping me maintain my color, maintain my plants, replacing or pruning those back too?
Well, we have a floral department that can take care of a lot of those things as far as any issues. We actually have to go in and take some pH testing of the soil. We
Okay.
want to see what the alkalinity is, if we have a lot of calcium problems, and then make adjustments to that soil so that they can grow very wonderful, beautiful material.
The more I know Jim, the more I know the greenery, and the more I understand the maintenance, it really is a whole lot more than just raking.
Absolutely.
The technical acumen that goes into it. Can you talk to me a little bit about some of the folks that you do have on staff?
Sure.
As
I
a
would
matter
love
of fact,
to.
love to.
Got a great group of people. Stuart Grant, who's a horticulturist from Clemson University. He runs basically our residential maintenance department here on Hilton Head Island. And he's got 4 or 5 supervisors with a lot of horticultural knowledge
And I don't mean to interrupt you,
Yep.
but when you talk horticultural knowledge, I'm talking about like technical things. Like we would love to have him talk on TV, but we wouldn't understand it. But I just didn't realize there was so much science that went into this.
Absolutely. We've got science and math and all sorts of things that go into it behind with the backgrounds. And these guys spend a lot of time in school learning things. And then we come out and we use that education in a day-to-day use to see how things are growing, how things
Yes.
are going, make them beautiful. Basically, we want the client to be happy with what they have.
Does maintenance depend on where you are on the island or in the low country as far as it's better to do maintenance in the morning, in the summer or winter? Does it matter seasonally?
Not exactly. I mean,
Okay.
the biggest thing that I think is we need to be careful of is irrigation. In the
Okay.
summertime, we really don't want to run water overnight as much as possible.
Okay.
Because we can have some issues there with both fungal and insects with our humid nights.
Okay.
But
that makes
other than
sense.
that, you know, just about any time it's going to work fine.
And of course, it's beautiful right now. And as we're into the spring and summer season,
Mm-hmm.
do we still have to be careful of doing maintenance in the winter?
Now, there's lots of things we do in the wintertime.
Okay.
Wintertime maintenance is when we get to go and do all the rejuvenative pruning of plant material that has some dead branches, cross branches. We have material that hasn't been doing well. We get all that old material, the dead material out, and we allow it to flush back out, and we can take it and reduce the heights
Okay.
overall.
Why is it so important to do that?
In the wintertime?
Yeah.
Well, because all the plant is basically in a dormant state, so to speak. It's not putting on a lot of growth. The nutrients are in the roots.
Okay.
We're not putting on a lot of active growth. So we can go in and remove a third or more of the plant material.
Oh, wow.
You know, rule of thumb is no more than a third.
Okay.
But we can selectively do
Okay.
a little bit more than that if need be. And we've had great success with plants coming out of dormancy and doing wonderful that next year.
See, I mean, this is really exciting. And again, you know, it's fun to look at the beautiful foliage. It's fun to look at the plants, but this is kind of the nuts and bolts of keeping it all gorgeous.
Absolutely.
We're going to take a break here on Lynes on Design. We're going to come right back, and we're going to go to another fabulous property and talk about this property that we're going to. Give us a little setup for this.
Well, it's on the beach,
Okay.
so it's a great environment. We've actually got overseeded turf area at the next property. So you're going to see some winter grass or a cool season grass that's been applied to this yard.
Ooh, and we'll kind of get a sneak preview of what they're going to be doing here in the next few weeks to really get this gorgeous. Stay with us. We'll be right back here on Lynes on Design. On Design. I am here with Jim Van Dyke from the Greenery, and we are at a different location. We're here in Sea Pines. This is beautiful. It's on the beach and a very different look. Yes,
it doesn't have quite the natural planting. It does have a lot on the exterior, on the outsides, but you know, for the most part, it's a little bit more of a manicured, a little bit more of a defined look.
All right. As we were driving over here, I thought of about 50 things I wanted to ask you, and I think, again, the more you know about maintenance, the more questions you have about maintenance. I find, you know what I mean? It's now true. I realize I really don't know anything about it. But the first thing I noticed upon driving up was the grass was lush and green.
Yes, and this is a overseeded turf area.
Okay. What does that mean?
Well, basically, we have warm season grasses and cool season grasses. And for those that are up north, they're used to fescue and rye and Kentucky bluegrass and those kind of things. Those are cool season grasses. And down here, we have more of the warm season grasses, which are centipede and Bermuda, St. Augustine, and zoysia. And here in the wintertime, we can overseed with a cool season grass.
Okay, I'm
and
with
allow
you.
it to come up, and then when it gets nice and warm and hot, it'll go ahead and go away. Start to just go away on its own.
When it comes to planting grasses and selecting the kind that I want, what goes into that decision-making process?
Oh, lots of things.
Okay.
It's everything from the amount of shade that you have in a yard, the amount of sun, soil type. Do you have insect problems?
Okay.
Are there low spots where we're going to have a lot of water sitting and we have potential for fungal issues? What kind of look do people want? Do you want to have a little bit of a green all winter long without doing an overseeding?
Okay.
Because St. Augustine's going to keep its green for the most part all winter unless we have a harsh cold time or a nice frost like we've had a couple times. Zoysia is going to go dormant very early.
What about how I want it to look, whether it's lush or flat? Does any of that have anything to do with it too?
Mowing heights.
Okay.
You know, all right, Bermuda, everyone's kind of familiar with Bermuda from golf courses and everything. Well, zoysia has a very similar look to Bermuda. It can be cut really tight and short.
Okay.
So it can have that real manicured, fine look all season long. St. Augustine's going to have a much higher trim to it. You need to be about 3 inches of cut. So it's going to have a thicker look, a nice matte to it. Kind of feels neat on your feet when you're walking in it barefoot.
And one of the things I notice, and not to interrupt you, is when I look at the landscaping now and I look at the maintenance, I see a lot of layers, a lot of levels, a lot of texture, a lot of actually design elements that seem to go into the maintenance part as well as the design.
Yep. So we want to create those elements and have different textures and colors like you're talking about, different shades of green, so to speak. You know, if we can add in that little flora and fauna at the end with the color, the blues and the reds, that's great. But you know, there's a lot to be said with variegation of colors and plants. We have grasses, we have turf grass itself, and then we also have ornamental grasses.
And again, we've been talking about grasses. We're talking about lots of different maintenance things, and we certainly can't cover everything in one show. But the other thing that I wanted to ask you about was, I never think about, as we drove in on the driveway, driveways, brickwork, walkways. What is that, or does that have anything to do with maintenance for you?
Well, it certainly does. I mean, one thing we're definitely going to look at is safety aspects.
Oh, gosh, I hadn't thought of that.
We're going to go ahead and point out some key elements there. I mean, we don't want people to trip and fall,
Right.
obviously. So, you know, we have this beautiful canopy of trees. Well, all these trees have roots, and these roots are growing underneath driveways and walkways, and they're starting to, you know, upheave a little bit and cause some issues and problems. So we're going to point out some safety issues. There's everything from reapplying asphalt, redoing concrete.
Okay.
There's grinding of some driveways. But I'll tell you, one of the greatest things out there right now is pervious pavers.
Now, we talked about that once. Remind us,
Yep.
pervious pavers.
Well, pervious pavers are made of a material that's somewhat porous, so it's going to allow water to penetrate through.
Okay.
So it's not shedding so much as it is actually allowing it to penetrate some. And it's good for the root zones and the soils underneath. So it's going to allow roots of trees to still get water. And it's kind of that green element that's out there right now. And they're long lasting.
What I hear you talk about a lot is not only maintenance, but prevention too. It seems like you sort of tie that whole thing in together.
Well, you know, everyone kind of says, I want minimal landscape maintenance.
Okay.
Well, that's kind of an iffy subject.
Exactly.
But, you know, we try to do the best we can. And, you know, there's always going to be some maintenance. Plants are going to grow. Things are going to continue to change. So we have to keep going with it. But if we can minimize that to the best ability, we're going to.
But don't you think that's like your health? If I keep on a good structured maintenance program, I'm not going to have to do tons of stuff because I keep it maintained. I mean, that's kind of the point.
Absolutely. People don't want to have to spend money on the same thing over and over and over. So if we can get the right materials in the first time, if we can hear what the client's asking for up front, we can go ahead and give that to them. We can produce the landscape that they like. And that's everything from the hardscape you talked about, the irrigation system, the drainage, the plant material, the turf, the way that the house looks from the street. So you have the actual whole package, and it's going to be a layered look like you were talking about.
One thing that I noticed about a house like this, you've got the front and then you've got the beach side. I would think the maintenance issues would be completely different. Are they?
Not completely, but there are a lot of differences. You know, here we have this nice canopy, so we've got a lot of shade to deal with here. And a lot of material isn't going to dry out as fast, so the irrigation doesn't have to be run as much. So we've got completely different settings in the back on that beach, hot sun in the summer. The grass is going to have a different look because it's full sun versus a fair bit of shade in the front. So yes, we do have to deal with two different things and two different elements.
This is why we hire professionals. I mean, really and truthfully, again, I think the more educated we are as consumers, the more we realize why you are doing what you're doing and what sets you apart from a lot of other people. I'd love to touch on a bit of irrigation, since as it gets warmer and warmer and warmer, it is something that you all really pride yourself on, you feel is a really important part of the maintenance.
Yeah. Well, as we all know, it gets really hot in the summer, especially July, August. I mean, we'll go sometimes 3 or 4 weeks without any rain. And if we don't have some sort of moisture on this material, it's going to dry up, shrivel up, and potentially die, especially when you're doing new plantings or new installations. So we have to ensure that there's full coverage, what we call head-to-head coverage. It's a little technical term you're going to hear from an irrigation tech. So we've got to make sure that there's correct spacing, the right amount of water that's going to the right spot. We don't have 2 or 3 different types of heads, whether, you know, rotors, spray heads, drip irrigation, xeriscaping, you know, all of those things go into it. So we're going to assess the whole irrigation system.
And let me take you from, we're going to assess the whole irrigation system. One of the things we talked about as we were getting ready to kind of do this second part of the show was, you and I just talked about what is the most important part of your job, what do you love the most about it, and what are you most proud of? And the thing that you said to me that had so much impact was, I have to be a good listener. I have to pay attention to what my clients want. Why? Why is that so important?
Well, if we don't listen to what the client wants, we're not going to get it right the first time. And we're going to constantly be at wit's end and trying to understand afterwards. So if we have to take a role of active listening, yes, we want to give recommendations, yes, we want to give great advice, We're not going to let them do the wrong thing.
Okay.
But we need to listen. We need to hear what it is that they want. Do they want to have a very manicured lawn, or do they want to have a little bit more of a loosey-goosey type of look? So if we listen to that up front, we can make the right recommendations.
Are we educated consumers, as I interrupt you? Are we educated consumers?
Most people are.
Okay, we're getting there.
And that's what we want to do. I mean, the Greenery wants to go ahead and educate everyone so that you do the right things, so that you have the right information to make the right decisions. And we'll help you out as much as we can.
It doesn't get any better than this. Thank you all for joining us here on Lynes on Design, and thank you, Jim Van Dyke from the Greenery.
You're welcome, Debbie.
Bye-bye.